Billy Blue, my knight in shining brindle. Welcome to another episode of A Poet Reads to Write. You've caught me at a funny time today. I might sound quite jovial, but I'm actually really crook. I'm not well at all at the moment. I've been lifting and carrying my beautiful, precious greyhound, my Billy Blue now, for about 6 years, up and down stairs and things. He's a gorgeous dog, but he is so timid, very gentle, very quiet, but he is a very timid boy. And like me, he's not a problem solver. So he really doesn't like stairs. And the other thing about Billy and me, as I've said in the past, we both love a cuddle. So every time I pick Billy up, it's just cuddle time. He loves it and I love it. So for 6 years, I've often had him up in my arms, carrying him. I just love him to bits. But I've caused a big problem. Finally, it has caught up with me. He is almost 40 kilos, so he's not a small dog. And I don't know whether I have a hernia or it's just a badly strained muscle or whether it's even a problem with my hip. But picking Billy up and the twisting motions while he's up in my arms to get him in and out of doorways and upstairs and things, it has caused a problem for me. So I'm in quite a bit of pain. So Mum has intervened. Fortunately, she's got me to go up and spend a month with them up in the Blue Mountains. It's a lovely house, of course. It's all on a concrete slab, so I just walk in and out, so there are no stairs. So I'm having a month up with Mum and Dad in the Blue Mountains, looking after them, also doing their mowing and vacuuming and that sort of thing, but also looking after myself and not having any stairs. And today, my leg is feeling much better. I have finally turned a corner. I've been up there now for just over a week, and for the first week it was, terrible, very acute, nasty pain, very shooting, nasty pain. And it's been keeping me awake at night as well. It sort of throbs a bit at night in bed. But I think I have now turned a corner. So I've come home to make this video and to get a few things that I need for work and my reading projects and that sort of thing. So I've come home just to get a few things, make this video, and then I'll go straight back up to Mum and Dad's this afternoon and keep away from stairs and just keep looking after this leg. I'm hoping to spend probably another fortnight up in the mountains and just really get this leg right before I come home. And then I need to work out whether I go back to lifting Billy and probably cause this problem again, or whether we have the courage together, looking over there, because that's of course where he is, whether we have the courage to revisit the ramp. I bought a ramp, and maybe we can revisit the ramp and get him up in and out of my home with the ramp if he won't touch the stairs. We'll work it out. But I am feeling a lot better at the moment. I am feeling much relieved. So I'm feeling good. And I'm really looking forward to getting this video uploaded later on. I haven't made a video for well over a week, and I'm really looking forward to getting this one done. All right, the point of this video. As I said in my last video, in that wrap-up, as a tribute to Stuart Griffin and his wonderful channel, Stuart Griffin 1001. Oh, I love Stuart's channel. But as I said in that wrap-up tribute to Stuart, I was bringing, at the moment I am writing my own autobiographical verse novel to be called Hounded, and I'm on the last chapter. I'm on the final stage, the final turn to hopefully bring this novel to a conclusion. And because of my problems with binary opposition and binary ways of thinking, I've built that into the architecture of my whole verse novel. So my verse novel is all written in couplets, and every chapter, and there are 7 chapters, of course, 7 days of creation, 7 days in the week. So there are 7 chapters. And each chapter is divided into 2 parts. The architecture of my struggles with binary ways of thinking. So my last chapter, the first part of my last chapter was on death and bereavement. And I've just finished that last chapter. I brought that now to a conclusion, that first section. So I've just done this, beautiful. I was looking at Irving Finkel, this wonderful keeper of cuneiform from the British Museum, and I was using the prism of Irving Finkel, to look at some real beautiful ghost stories. Things like Jonathan Stroud's not the Bartimaeus sequence, the Lockwood and Co sequence. His YA ghost busting cycle of 5 novels. It was just absolute hoot reading that. It was so much fun. And then of course I read Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House. Went back to, of course, The Turn of the Screw. So I've been reading some really fun ghost stories through that prism of Irving Finkel, and looking at all of that. So I brought that to a conclusion, that section on death and bereavement, with a meditation on, of course, the Iliad, as I said in that wrap-up. So I've just done the Iliad, and now to start the final section of my last chapter, which is under the umbrella theme, if you like, of quest, I'm, of course, beginning with the Odyssey by Homer. So this is my segue from part 1 to part 2 of my last chapter. Part 1 finished with a meditation on the Iliad and the rage of Achilles. Living with bereavement is not always a healthy, good thing. And poor old Achilles, he's living with bereavement when his lover Patroclus was murdered killed at the Battle of Troy by the great Trojan prince Hector. His bereavement for the loss of his great love, Patroclus, launches him into it, doesn't it, on the battlefield, the great rage of Achilles, as he literally dams up rivers with the bodies of Trojan warriors. Living with bereavement is not always a healthy, good thing, and the Iliad is all about Achilles' great bereavement. So my segue into my last section on quest is now going to be looking at the Odyssey. And as I said in that wrap-up video, I've chosen for this project, because I've always lived before with Robert Fagel's free verse translations of the Iliad and the Odyssey. And I love Robert Fagel's, and I still do. I think he has just such a wonderful ear for very richly dramatic use of the vernacular language. I really love what Fagel's did with both the Iliad and the Odyssey, and the Aeneid for that matter. But for this project, I've decided to concentrate on the brand new Emily Wilson metrical verse translations of both the Iliad and the Odyssey. So I've just finished her work on the Iliad, and I'm about to launch into the Odyssey, and I'm having an absolute blast with it. I am really enjoying it. I love reading now the Fagels beside the Emily Wilson, looking at the free verse alongside the metrical verse. It's a real hoot. It's a great fun thing to do. So I'm having a blast now looking at the Odyssey as I now try and start this final part of my last chapter. And while I've been reading the Homer, of course, I couldn't help but revisit Plato. Plato, of course, banished the poets from his great republic, didn't he? A republic that had a lot in mind, a lot in closeness, I think, to Hitler's Third Reich. Poor old Plato. I'm not really a big fan of Plato as a philosopher. I'm much more a fan of Aristotle, to be honest. But anyway, here we go with Plato. So Plato banned the poets from his republic, and in particular, of course, he banned Homer. He hated Homer. Why did he hate Homer? Why did he hate the poets? Well, of course, for Plato and his idealism, the perfect forms beneath the world, or on the other side of the veil. Plato really thought that Homer particularly, but most of the poets, were quite sacrilegious in the way they retold Greek myths and legends and the way they emphasize, those aspects of the nature of the gods to do with things like, for example, treachery, greed, jealousy. The gods are not always nice beings in the world of Homer, in the world of Greek mythology. What Plato never understood, of course, was text type. Any culture that is reliant on storytelling, storytelling needs complication. That's where you get that momentum to drive a narrative forward. And what better way to add complication to a story, of course, than to have flawed characters. And if your characters are the gods, well, they need flaws. They need that jealousy, that betrayal, that treachery. They need all of these things, those flaws, to garner forward the complication to give the narrative momentum. And Plato never really quite understood that. He wanted the gods, of course, in the myths and legends and in Homer, to be these perfect, ideal representations of beauty or love or sexuality or, for Plato, everything was about the perfect forms. So he thought that the Homer and the poets were quite sacrilegious. So I've been having a bit of a fun time as well, looking at Homer through the lens of Plato a little bit. Obviously, I don't agree with Plato, but I love reading it and thinking about it. And it's just a different way in to the world of Homer. It's a lot of fun. So I've been looking again at this, my own, the complete works of Plato. These are what I usually return to when I want to look at Plato. As I said, I spend more time with Aristotle than Plato, but Plato can be fun as well, I guess. And of course, just recently, there's the English classicist Robin Waterfield, who's just come up with this biography of Plato. And it's been a fun time rereading this fun biography of Plato as well. Believe it or not, this is the first, and at the moment, only biography that has ever been written of Plato. First, primary sources on the life of Plato, of course, are very difficult. He left behind a huge body of work, philosophical work, but not a lot of it, of course, is biographical. So it's actually been quite difficult to rediscover the actual life of Plato and to tell it. And Robin Waterfield, I think, did a beautiful job with this. I see it's a lovely cover, beautiful book, and this is a hoot to read. It's been really enjoyable. It's actually softened my heart a little bit towards Plato, spending time with this great biography. As I said, I've always been after Aristotle. I never thought that much of Plato. I never took to him at all, really, except maybe the Symposium. But most of his other works, I don't really like Plato all that much. His rejection of the poets from his, how can you banish all the poets from any republic? Oh, come on. But yes, reading this biography has certainly softened my heart a little bit. It's been a great hoot. I really recommend it if you would like to get into Plato yourself. And now that I'm about to launch into the Odyssey, of course, I've got this. I was in a second-hand bookshop a few years back, and I found this. It's a beautiful thing from the Folio Society, and my thing with the Folio Society. This is the World of the Odysseus by the great Maurice Finlay. Of course, his real name was Moses Finkelstein. He was an incredible Jewish-American Marxist scholar when he was a young man. So he was a very left-wing radical scholar. He did a lot of work, on classical Greece and translating texts from classical Greek into English. And this is just a wonderful book that he has written. A wonderful book, as I said, called The World of Odysseus. And it's just a wonderful book. It isn't only an introduction to the Odyssey. It is also equally, really, an introduction to the world of the Iliad. But it's been really fun for me to revisit Finlay's book, the great Moses Finkelstein, Maurice Finlay. It's been a great time reacquainting myself with this wonderful book as I've been looking again at the Iliad and the Odyssey. And again, I really recommend this. It's beautifully written, very dramatic. It's a beautiful introduction to the world of Homer, both the Iliad and the Odyssey. It's a marvelous thing to spend time with. And then looking at introductions to Homer, I also bought and been spending time with this. Edith Hall is an English classicist who also specializes in the world of ancient Greece. She's done a lot of work on classical Greek or Athenian tragedy in particular. You might remember I did a video a couple of months ago, several months ago, on suicide and my own suicidal ideation and struggles with mental health, collapse and decline, challenge, those sorts of things. Edith Hall wrote a very, very moving book called Against the Furies. Great title, isn't it? But it's a wonderful book that treats the history of suicide in her own family and the legacy of living with the trauma, the cross-generational trauma of living with suicide. It was a very moving book. It made a big impact on me. But this is going back to her more scholarly work. So this is a work that she's written just on the return of Ulysses. It's a cultural history, if you like, an introduction to the whole world of Homer's The Odyssey. It's a brilliant book. I really recommend Edith Hall. If you're looking for a classical scholar, a way into classical Greek tragedy, or in this instance, The Odyssey of Homer, Edith Hall is a wonderful scholar, beautiful writer, a real enthusiast, really loves her work. I really, really enjoy, and she's done a lot of work on Aristotle, my man. So I love Edith Hall, and this is a tremendous book. It's been great fun spending time with this. And while I'm doing the Odyssey, as I said, that's going to take me into my final part 2 of my final chapter, which is on quest. And as I finish looking at Homer's The Odyssey and all the material I've just looked at now, I'm more interested in looking at some other types of Odyssey, if you like. One of the books I'm going to be looking at is this beautiful book by Isabel Allende, A Long Petal of the Sea. This is a marvelous book about somebody else, a young Spanish person's in the early 20th century trying to flee the Spanish Civil War and the Second World War, and they end up in Chile and begin a new life. So it is all about displacement and migration and, being that very culturally vulnerable situation. This is a wonderful novel. So I'm going to be spending a fair bit of time with this work by Isabel Allende as well. And of course, my wonderful left-wing poet, the great Chilean poet Neruda, Pablo Neruda, he comes up in this, of course, doesn't he? So this is a marvelous book to read. I haven't read this book for several years. So I'm really looking forward to rereading it, reacquainting myself with it, and having a meditation on this in this final section of Hounded on quest. So this is going to be brilliant. And then another thing I've recently just bought from the Folio Society, this marvelous collection of short stories by Jhumpa Lahiri, the interpreter of melodies. This is a wonderful collection of a dozen or so short stories. Again, I haven't read this for a couple of years, so I'm really looking forward to reacquainting myself with this. I've always loved Lahiri's work, so when Folio decided to come up with this beautiful, little edition, opened so beautifully in the hand, it's all illustrated. I just love this. So I decided to buy this from the Folio Society, and when I reread Lahiri for my Hounded, I'm going to be looking at her through this beautiful volume. This is, of course, a wonderful story. Again, like the Isabel Allende, this is, of course, celebrating that displacement of Bengali people from India to the United States. And all the stories in this book are about that expat Bengali experience of being acculturated into the American context, and again displacement and grief and loss and longing and remembrance, all of those great themes. So this will be another way into as I develop this theme of quest in this last chapter, this wonderful Indian writer Jhumpa Lahiri. I love this. Haven't read it for a few years, so once again, like the Isabel Allende, I'm really looking forward to getting this and rereading it. And now I'll be rereading Lahiri in this beautiful edition from the Folio Society. Wow. And then a couple of other things I'm about to launch into. This is again another American classical scholar, Daniel Mendelsohn. He's a wonderful American Jewish classicist. And he's written these two wonderful books, partly on the Odyssey of Homer, but they're also looking very much at his own personal family history, particularly his relationship with his dad. These books are both, books about quest, about journey, about remembrance, about reconciliation, about family or familial love. I just love the way Mendelssohn weaves in and out of all of these great stories. So I've got here an Odyssey, a father, a son, and an epic. And I've got here Three Rings, a tale of exile, narrative, and fate. They're both wonderful books. Again, like the Isabella Lunde and the Jhumpa Lahiri. I haven't read these in a couple of years. So again, I'm really looking forward to revisiting these when I develop this theme of quest in my last chapter. After I've done these, I'm going to be looking at, there's a wonderful Australian Jewish composer called Elena Katz-Chernin, and she's actually, I think, Ukrainian originally, but from Eastern Europe anyway, and she migrated to Australia, and all of her, the classical music that she composes is absolutely wonderful, very rich, beautiful music that I just love. Katz-Chernin is an absolute marvel. But she also really echoes back again to Russian and Ukrainian, folk tales and folk mythology and all sorts of things. So her music really deals with cultural displacement, with quest, with immigration and finding new homes. After I've looked at the Mendelssohn, I'm going to be moving into Elena Katz-Chernin, doing a meditation on that beautiful music of the quest, of the Odyssey, if you like. Before bringing my whole book to a close, I will be bringing Hounded to a close with a meditation on those great American, mid-20th century American painters, Mark Rothko and Lee Krasner. I'm going to be doing a great meditation on Mark Rothko and Lee Krasner, two great mid-20th century Jewish American abstract painters who I just love. And their way of doing, Rothko, of course, did pass away by suicide. So it will allow me to return to those great themes that have been running through Hounded around mental health, suicidal ideation, trying to somehow foster, nurture, if you like, a healthier mental health state. There's a lot of light in Hounded. It's turning out in many ways to be a love letter to my Billy Blue. So there is a lot of light, a lot of humour as well in Hounded. But there are also some very dark places to do with my bereavements and my struggles with mental health. So Quest, in many ways it is a quest for better mental health, for a better headspace. Maybe it will end up becoming a quest for the finishing of this life and going into the next life, which is where, of course, I really have Rothko and Krasner coming in. If anybody painted the ecstatic vision, that moment of leaving this life and going to something else, in terms of a panpsychist type vision, I think it really is Rothko. I love what he did there. So we'll see where it all finishes. So I'm really excited about these reading projects. I've come home to make these videos. I'm living without stairs, so I'll go back to mum and dad's for a fortnight after this, try and get this leg right if I possibly can. If it's a hernia, I'm going to have to eventually go to a doctor and maybe have surgery. I don't know. But I think I have turned a corner. It is a little bit better. So I think I'm going all right. My beautiful Billy Blue is going okay. So as long as he's all right, I am ultimately okay as well. I love that dog so much. So this is my wonderful new little video for you. I hope you've enjoyed it. And this is The Quest. Thank you and bye for now.